Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Danny Guillory. I am here with,
Steve Thomas.
hey, how's everybody doing? Thank you for spending a little bit of your time with us today. Me and Steve have been cooking this up for a while. We talk to customers a lot, quite often, about various different topics when it comes to endpoint management. So we decided to kick off this series. So let's jump into a few housekeeping rules. So a little housekeeping rules, and then we'll get into introductions. We'll jump right into the content. So, I got six cameras, so don't necessarily pay attention to where I'm looking. Um, what the series is. So, we're going to talk to you obviously about various different topics. We decided to create this series again. We talked to customers about various different topics. So, we wanted to help customers understand more and reach more of our audience. So, if we only talk to 5 customers a week, um, that really gets our message out and the strategy out to a very small audience. So we decided to pick this medium to actually go ahead and try to reach a wider audience. What to expect? Various different topics throughout this series. Today we obviously picked talking about modern policy management, just from a perspective of trying to help customers think about those traditional policies, group policies, and move them into cloud policies. It's a process, and it really takes a conversation. We're going to try not to also make this content too long. We really want to try to keep it not short and sweet, but consumable, but also not too long.
And,
And
and don't forget that you have a voice too. We want to hear from you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leverage the chat session. We have my esteemed colleagues Susan Taylor and Heather Paulson here to help with the moderation of the chat. So please feel free to ask any questions, but also remember that we are enforcing Microsoft's code of conduct. Trust me, if you want to troll me, you can troll me on Twitter. That's fine, but let's stick to the code of conduct here.
absolutely, yeah, definitely. We have a great community. I gotta say, we really do have a group of people that we work with. So let's jump into a little introduction. Obvious, we'll probably do it through the first episode, and we will see how it evolves as we go with other episodes. So a little bit about myself. Obviously, again, my name is Danny Guillory. I'm a part of the customer acceleration team. My passion literally is to help customers. I used to be on the other side of the camera. I used to be a customer for 15 years. I've only been at Microsoft for 8 years, and I came in as a PFE, dealing with SMS and really just device management all since 1999. A small facility backwoods of Louisiana. So born and raised there, and just been doing it my whole life. So I get up literally every day, and what makes me happy is talking to customers, helping them learn from my mistakes, learn from other customer mistakes. So other things I like to share. If I can make anybody's road easier than what mine was, hey, I've done my job at the end of the day. Steve?
I'm Steve Thomas. I'm a senior PM over in commercial endpoint customer experience engineering. I work alongside Danny and many other colleagues as well. I've been at Microsoft now almost 15 years this May. I started originally in support. And after I worked a few years in support, I moved into consulting. And then after I worked in consulting, I joined engineering in 2018. You may have known me from some of my past work in virtualization and virtualization technologies and VDI and AppV. I've been working in the Intune and Config Manager and Unified Windows Endpoint Management space now for the last 3.5 years. And I'm very excited. I'm very pumped to be doing this with Danny and reaching out to you guys directly through this forum. I think we have a wonderful opportunity to, kind of talk to you about modern transformation a little bit more in depth and have kind of an informal conversational tone about it, while at the same time having a little bit of fun because, Danny's involved, so it's going to be fun. Of course.
Of course, right? We are all kinds of stuff, and I can't tell you how much weird stuff I did when I was a customer, man. So I'm actually kind of jealous of customers nowadays, right? Every time I talk to customers, kind of the first thing I tell them is, I wish I had the things you guys have now because I had none of this. And man, the laundry list of stuff I created. I can't tell you how many visual VB scripts I wrote to do different stuff. Oh man, kind of jealous of customers.
Right.
So
Customers now are finding a lot more solutions in code, which is so much better than what you and I used to do, several years back when we called it Housekeeping, where we were kind of taking a little bit of code, a little bit of scripts, a little bit of chewing gum and duct tape and a wing and a prayer and creating this Rube Goldberg type solution that somehow managed to work and we managed not to get fired. But we've moved so far from that, and we're continuing to move in much more positive directions.
Good. That's all good. All right, so I'm going to kick us off with a little bit of PowerPoint. Steve, chime in where you need. Tell us things you're telling the customers. Let's just treat this like some other conversations we normally have. So the past 3 weeks have been pretty interesting. Probably the hottest topic I've talked to customers about is what we're talking about today is really policy management. So group policies to cloud policies. Man, is that an interesting conversation. And again, I think of all the things I did back in the past. I hope none of the places I used to work are still using any of this stuff. I can only hope. But that really just goes to show, like, we do meet customers that they're really deep enriched in config, group policy. So think about 20 years of group policy. And what amazingly enough, when I'm talking to the customers, is like the guy I'm talking to is actually not the guy that created the group policy. It's like 3 guys before him. And when I'm talking to the current person, it's like, hey, what's your plan to move forward? I don't know. What's Microsoft got? Like, so when I actually unpack from that conversation when I'm talking with them is a lot of fear. It's like, I don't want to remove this because I don't even know if it's applied, where it's applied, what other domains it's on. Steve, I'm sure you hear some of the same stuff, right?
Well, yeah, as I'm talking to you from my Surface Pro X running Windows 10 on ARM64, shameless plug, I thought I'd throw in there just for no reason whatsoever. Hey, we do live reads here sometimes. The thing that we have to realize here is we're not just talking about technical items. We're talking about a culture of sorts. We're almost looking at taking the policy culture as we know it and transforming that. And what I mean is, before I came to Microsoft and all through my time at Microsoft, probably when it comes to a major first-party platform release that we have, whether it's an operating system release of Windows or whether it's a release of Office, the number one thing that always comes initially from customers is, where's the ISO? That's the very first thing they want. They want to get a hold of the bits. And they can't get the bits soon enough. And the moment it goes RTM or GA, they want that ISO. The number 2 thing, where's the ADMX files? Where are the policies? Because you know what it's time for? It's time for the policy pizza party. That's right. You know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the policy pizza party. Okay, so this is what happens. It's like, okay, we now have the new policy, so it's time to get all the stakeholders together. The new policies are here. And everybody, let's rent a conference room or let's have a retreat and let's get the ADMX spreadsheet with all the new policies. Let's do a beyond compare with the 2 of them and say, hey, these are the new policies, and let's rent this conference room out. Let's order pizza, and then let's go line by line in picking out what we're going to do with each policy. Configured, not configured, enabled, disabled, and they do that every 6 months now because we now have major releases of Office and Windows every 6 months. So every 6 months we are now adding, but it's always a delta of an add. We're always increasing policies. Meanwhile, older policies that have been set are now going dormant or they're going legacy, either because what they were designed for no longer exists, or they're configuring something that doesn't really need to be configured anymore. Obviously, security policies are very important here, but the problem we have with group policy is group policy handle security, handle preferences, handle configuration control. And at the end of the day, we have thousands and thousands of knobs and buttons. And what winds up happening is everyone is afraid of touching what they've done in the past because they're afraid of something that, especially like you talk about, well, this was done 5 years ago or 7 years ago. Well, I don't want to touch that because the way I look at it is best case scenario, it's sending a benign policy down that's just setting a registry value that doesn't even exist anymore. But worst case scenario, I remove this policy and something somewhere breaks. And that's what customers are afraid of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here, let me jump into a little bit of PowerPoint. Had this up earlier, but I wanted to focus back on the stage so you can see us. So the way I like to talk about policy with customers is, current policy, future policy. Current policy obviously is not flexible. It's just kind of static. It's what's got you hooked to Active Directory. And guess what? We hear all the time is, I gotta have hybrid because I need these group policies. And I feel like I'm in some medieval sword fight with the customers. Like, no, you don't. Block, block, block. And it's an interesting conversation and dialogue. I'll tell you kind of some thoughts. If I was back in IT Director again, what I would do. But yeah, let's get through the list first. Policy over VPN. I'm not a big fan of that. Obviously, security over VPN. That just sounds weird because, like, first off, like how do you get it secure to get policy over the VPN? Configuration drift, reporting, monitoring, those things are very challenging in the AD infrastructure today. Like I'm like literally being bold with customers lately in my conversations. Like, stop it. If I was to go back to be IT Director again, if I need to make a setting, would I go to group policy? That would be the last thing I would do. Like the very last thing. There's too many other ways, much more efficient or effective ways to do that. Trust me, your VPN guy will love you for actually not doing that. So before I ramble on there, let's talk about future policy. So this is where things get exciting, right? I remember my first dip in the toe of like dealing with cloud, and what I was wanting to do was deliver policy without a domain controller. And it seems like a pie in the sky type thing to want, but it's here. Like literally, you can deliver policy from anywhere. It can be secure from anywhere. I can tell you how many times I work from a hotel or from a coffee shop. Not now, obviously, but before we were all traveling, and I'm secure from anywhere, and as well as I can report and monitor from anywhere. So when I look at how policy has evolved, all of these things are here for you to consume. So earlier when I said, right, I wish I had the tools now back then, that almost resonates from a stance of, and my parents used to tell me this, I'm sure everybody else's parents, I wish I knew what I knew now back then. It's exactly what you have with this technology. As you're trying to figure out how to go cloud and modernize, you have these new tools, new things now to help you make those older decisions better. If you had the tools you have now back then, would you do what you did back then? Probably not. So there's just so much there that I try to help customers understand. Like GPO, to me, it's dead. It's nothing I would do if I was to be back an IT Director again. If I was back being an IT Director and I saw we were doing things with group policy, I would say, hey, after Friday, this is like your last option. We're not going to do that. So, Steve, anything that what I forget? You're on mute, Steve. Comment of the year, right? You're on mute.
There we go. First mistake of the entire series right there. And of course, you knew it was going to be me that made that. But I'm
more nervous. Like I just expected me to like spill this all over my desk by now.
I'm not nervous, but you know me, I'm not afraid of looking like a complete idiot. So one of my biggest strengths and one of my biggest weaknesses. The one thing I'd like to add there is there is a lot that tools can do to help us transform, but nothing is going to beat the collective intelligence of the stakeholders at the customer's organization that have to get together and have to do a different kind of pizza party. They have to have a policy rationalization pizza party where they take out that spreadsheet again and they go line by line and saying, do we need net meeting policies? No, we don't need net meeting policies. Look at all these policies in the spreadsheet that we have configured that stop being applicable with Windows XP or Windows Vista. All right, we can get rid of this. We hear about, our customers are really excited about a tool you're going to talk about here shortly, Danny, called policy analytics, and it is exciting. But one thing we have to drive home here is that policy analytics in and of itself is not the solution. It is the solution tool. The tool that helps you get to that solution, because part of the solution is going to be your rationalization of what knobs and levers you need to control. I always recommend, security is quite simple because we have baselines. We have baselines. One of, my colleagues over the years, Chris Jackson, Aaron Margosis, were always driving home that the concept of sticking with baselines, sticking with well-known and proven solutions, because that's going to be easy to provide a sense of security that everything is locked down, but everything at the same time is not so locked down that things become broken or unusable. And then we focus on the things that we need to control, and should we be controlling them? And if we're controlling them, let's adopt a device taxonomy approach rather than this one size fits all where we're going to set thousands and thousands of knobs and levers. Also, at the same time, there are things that we do through policy that Microsoft now has other options that simplify it and make it much more hassle-free. The one thing is some of the work that we're doing in the first-line worker space, where we're coming up with all kinds of solutions, not just with Windows, but cross-platform. But in the Windows world, I am so excited about Cloud Config. And the reason I'm excited about Cloud Config is because it is almost its own baseline for hassle-free devices. When I mean hassle-free devices, the very same thing that we were trying to do granularly with group policy, just to provide a simple lockdown, secure, but usable approach, can be done with some of these other solutions and done much easier, and done to the extent that we don't create the problems that we are dealing with now.
Yeah, spot on. So, all right, let's jump back into our PowerPoint because I see there's some really good questions coming in, and I want to make sure we have time to get to some of those. So questions we asked, right? And how many policies do you have? It's really weird to hear customers' response to these sometimes. Again, right? How many policies you got? I don't know. How many policies are applied? I don't know. I know the ones I did. How many policies do you have to operationalize? Was the last time you validated policies? Everything Steve just mentioned, like these are all of the questions we ask customers, and we're not asking questions just to waste time or get more information. We're actually wanting to get more information to understand how and why those policies were set. Do you still need to set those policies today? And then how do you set those policies? So the next most common thing is, hey, how do you get started? Is like literally the next question. That's what customers ask. So first things first, typically just go straight to Group Policy Management Console, find your policies. These are policies that may or may not look familiar. I just imported these into one of our labs to show you what that export looks like. But these policies came from Security Compliance Toolkit. Think of old school, I'm probably gonna date myself here, but old school US GCB baselines where you would import, apply them to OU, put a device in you, and then guess what? Nothing worked on the device. You had to relax the policies. That's kind of what these are. But these policies came from Security Compliance Toolkit, which is the innovation of Security Compliance Manager. Essentially, all I did was go into my group policy and I hit Save Report. When you hit Save Report, the file wants to save the default as a HTML, but make sure you change Save As Type to XML. Once you hit it to say XML, it saves it as XML, and then you can just go through import, which I'll show you real quick. So let's look at what it looks like. So here's what Group Policy Analytics looks like. Steven, I'm gonna hide your screen just for a second.
I'm gonna disappear. Bye. I'll be back.
Yes, he will definitely be back. Actually, let me get myself out the way too. There we go. All right, so you see here on the screen that I have group policies that have been imported into Group Policy Analytics. To actually get those policies I just exported, all I need to do is hit import, select the button here, they get a little pop-up, I put these in a folder, hit open, bada boom, bada bing, there you go. That is very quick import. One thing I will say that I've seen with certain customers, when they do this export, they will open them in some, let's say Notepad++. They may make some changes and then try to save it. If that XML is malformed at all, you could get some errors. Also, don't upload any XMLs that are over a meg. We're not looking for anything that large in size, and those are some two gotchas at least. So once you get that upload, this area here will refresh at the top with the summary area. And you can see here that, look, these policies just updated. Now, the way I like to look at these is, the very first thing my eye goes to is MDM support, right? Are these, what are they compatible with as far as MDM support? So I like to pick on BitLocker because it helps some elaboration. But what I can tell right off the bat, this column MDM support tells me that the group policies, this particular group policy, and the settings within that group policy were 77% MDM supported. So click on it. Once we click on it, now I get to see the settings inside the actual group policy object that was created. So I can see that this is a policy for BitLocker. Again, this came from the Security Compliance Manager, Security Compliance Toolkit. And I can see, hey, 2 of these are not ADMX support nor MDM support, but I do have a lot of them that are MDM support. What that means is that we have an equivalent setting for that inside our device configuration. So you don't need to add extra complexity. I would say that is adding complexity by going create custom ones. You can literally just go find the setting within device config and set that setting, and you're off to the races. The thing I like to challenge customers on is the policies that you see here that say no, right? I'm not going to avoid the obvious. Hey, there are 2 policies here that are not compliant. What does that mean? That means that these policies, a few different things, right? Mapping could be off or it's deprecated. In this case, they're not in the operating system because, look, the ADMX support is there, nor MDM support. So you should start asking questions. Hey, is this been deprecated? Hey, why do we have this set? One reason I also like to think about, have the conversation about BitLocker is because when we're talking to the device management person, that device management person was told to do something, told to go set this, told to report on it. But who owns the responsibility for that setting? Security. So like in a much more modern world, I would say that these would be a conversation. So Steve, I got you back on the screen too. So this is where I would start to have a conversation. I say, hey, security guys, do we need this? Why do we need this? Do we still need to set it this way? Should we set it another way? And hey, let me show you how to monitor that in another tool or somewhere else. Why am I being held responsible for a setting that you really care about? It may not be the end all of the conversation, but what I really want to dialogue there is say, hey, it's a working together thing. Make sure you work with whoever those peers are in security to say, take some of that work off your plate. Why are you dealing with the security settings? You're just a device management guy. You were told to deploy it, go away. Like do whatever you need to do. So have a conversation and work with the teams that are responsible for those settings. And that could be various different any settings. We could go into any one of the other policies and call out the exact same thing. Does that make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. Steve, anything to add? What I forget?
No, that's definitely clear there. I mean, for me, what I always tell customers who have been looking at the preview of this is, there's 2 approaches. They can start with looking at the exclamation points first, because those are some of the first decisions that they have to make as to, all right, here's where we are. Is this a gap that's going to block us from transforming? Is this a really true transformative blocker? Or is this something that we need to continue to be concerned about? Also, is this something that can be done another way? is another approach. But also, I point out that just because you can, and again, you want to prioritize this, of course, with critical stuff first, but even all the stuff that's solid green, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should, or doesn't necessarily mean you're going to gain here. Because remember, we have an opportunity. And we can choose to just go ahead and migrate everything whole hog, entire state over, or we can actually look at this now and say, hey, just like we used to do with apps and major OS upgrades, where we took the opportunity to rationalize our app portfolio, now we can kind of take the opportunity here to rationalize our policy portfolio as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super important, right? And I'm going to jump into, let's see what happened next. Let's look at the PowerPoint right quick. All right, so one of the things I'll call out, we do have lots of customers that are the split decision, right? And this is where I really like having that sword fight, that dialogue, that conversation. A lot of customers say, hey, we're going to use this tool. We saw all these settings, but we can't do cloud only right now. We do have configuration manager. I think that's even better, right? I think that's a very good step towards the right direction. If your North Star is cloud only, great, keep it. You should have a target for that. As you go through that process, hey, Danny, you just told us don't use group policy anymore. What should we use? If you have config man and you can't use cloud only right now because of maybe you're going through privacy conversations or you're looking at very different settings, you're working on your strategy, but you need to do something short term. You got config man, hands down, you should definitely use it. There's tons of IP out there that you can use to take your group policies to configuration items. And let's just mind melt you for a sec, right? If you take those group policies to configuration items, then deliver them with configuration baselines, you get built-in reporting, you get built-in monitoring, and built-in self-healing. So if anybody remembers the old Microsoft Fix-It button, man, I'm probably dating myself, but the old Microsoft Fix-It button that you hit the button and we would go fix whatever you were asking us to fix from whatever page you were on from support. Basically, that's what you built. Now, there's other ways to do that too, but again, a step in the right direction if you have configuration manager works. It even works because guess what? If you have a cloud attached config man, hands down, now you're really helping with that configuration drift, self-healing, monitoring, reporting, because those devices having a CMG will just remediate right over the air, right? So connect to the CMG, get my policy, remediate, send my status message, and then deal with the reporting and the monitoring from there. So now when somebody says, hey, how many devices in my environment don't meet this configuration or have configuration drift, you actually got an answer rather than, I don't know, or go do a whole lot of work through AD, build some reports, connect through VPN again, send more management traffic over there. It's really just a waste of time. When COVID hit, even before COVID hit, I told everybody that had a config manager state, you hands down should be putting in a CMG. And everybody went to co-management, which was great. But then the next thing they would say is, hey, where's my hardware inventory, software inventory, my collections? Well, hey, you're not sending your messages back to the server to do that stuff. So CMG, if you read the blog a while back, the big three, CMG, tenant attached, and then co-management where there's value to switch your workloads. But again, that process speaks to this process where if you have it, you hands down should be using it and making your lives a lot better, efficient, effective. And then once you get there, your next step can be cloud only. And that could be a whole other conversation in that on-ramp onto the cloud. So Steve, would I forget anything to add?
No, I would also say that some of this decision is going to be effective by what I call them indirect transformative events that are also happening. Another term I use is transformation freakonomics. And let me explain how I get there. So let's say I'm a large company, and for years I jumped on the line of business application bandwagon of developing for ActiveX. And I'm currently dealing with a situation where I still have a lot of internal applications that are still heavily dependent upon ActiveX, and as a result, I'm still leveraging IE very heavily. And for that reason, I've been reluctant to do a lot of GPO translations because I don't really know what the policy parity is, and I'm afraid of breaking things. And there's security along with zone configuration, and so something like browser transformation can affect the overall decision whether you go cloud attach or whether you go MDM only. Another item is, how the customer is adopting the Microsoft 365, what I call the holistic stack. Like, are they adopting this in a wave where we're going, O365, MCAS? Are we adopting Microsoft Defender Endpoint? Are we adopting not just Intune, not just the management plane, but the various other cloud services? Because generally speaking, especially for greenfield devices, customers who have adopted the Microsoft 365 holistic stack as a whole have found it easier to transform to cloud only, because they're leveraging things like OneDrive instead of map drives to on-premises servers. They're leveraging browser-based and session-based controls and DLP solutions as well, so they don't necessarily have to use group policy to manage that anymore. And again, it's all towards what we're currently at in terms of whether we're adopting this whole thing or if we're doing kind of an a la carte where we're adopting this in pieces or in phases.
Yeah, all good stuff. I mean, that's spot on information right there. Let's see. I'm gonna take a look at chat. Let's see if there's any good questions that pop up. So somebody asked, how can we manage policies in the remote remote devices use configuration manager? What's the best way you recommend? So I actually just talked about that a few seconds ago. CMG is going to be your best friend in that scenario. So hopefully you're working towards a CMG type solution. Again, if you don't have CMG, then you're stuck with VPN if that's your only route. Look, since COVID started, there's been like really just, I'll say, some hilarious stuff. I've heard customers literally driving by their office, connecting to the Wi-Fi outside the parking lot, and getting policies so that they can then go get the cloud management gateway settings. We've heard all types of elaborate type outside the box thinkings. Lots of questions if the session is being recorded. Yeah, it's being recorded. When do we deploy baselines versus single change management? Baselines versus single individual policies. I think that's more of a conversation and dialogue, right? So baselines are great. Like 100%, you should be dropping some baselines in, test those against some devices. As you test them against the devices, you should test to see what else do you need? What are the gaps there, right? A lot of times I'll find customers will come and say, hey, I need this setting from, I don't know, this logon script or something. Or there's what's the other settings in group policy, Steve? Preferences. So sometimes you need preferences. I encourage customers to think outside the box on those things, right? You don't necessarily need to set those things that way anymore. Yes, you could do it before because it was easy, nice, friendly UI. You could go through UI, just pick the registry setting, connect to a device, and do different things there. I just challenge customers to rethink what they're doing, because if you're just going to keep doing it that old way, you probably need to do something else. When we talk about modernizing, the thought process as well as the mental process and thought process needs to be also innovated too. Go ahead, Steve.
So we're getting this feedback from customers, and generally the feedback is we have a lot of customers that love baselines. baselines. They are really all about baselines, and they want our investments to be in more and more baselines, especially now that we have things, not just the basic Windows security baselines, but we have Office baselines. We now have the update baseline that's coming from the Windows Update folks. And that's a great approach, and I don't want to discourage that. And so I'm constantly delivering that feedback to my peers in engineering that we need to step on the gas with baselines. But baselines are not for every customer for a variety of reasons. And so customers are going back to, we love to twist knobs. We love to configure because we have so many different device taxonomies that we can't apply a one size fits all baseline to them. So we, in essence, sometimes have to create our own baselines internally. And so they like having all of the options available in this huge smorgasbord. And that's why we're seeing a lot of positive responses to the work we're doing with the settings catalog, where, hey, okay, if you want that type of granular control, here's the settings catalog. But if you want to just apply baselines, here are the baselines as well. We're not trying to confuse customers with conflicting solutions. We're just trying to give customers options and flexibility with configuration control and security.
Yeah, spot on. Giving you options as a IT pro, IT manager, CTO is what we want to do, right? A lot of times customers do bring up, hey, well, this doesn't have this setting. Well, cohesively, as you go through your process of modernizing your process, also modernizing how you're doing those settings or applying those settings, reporting and monitoring on them, you want to make sure that the things are in line with the various different workflows you're doing. So yeah, giving you options is exactly what we're doing to let you basically decide how you want to set those settings. Because I guarantee you, all the conversations I've had about modernizing policy with customers over the past 3 weeks, almost all of them have they all have different requirements, and they all may have the same end goal, but the way they reach that end goal will be very different. All right. So
here's a great question here. Currently everyone's favorite topic right now, everyone's utilizing GPO over VPN. Hybrid AD join versus going in on all cloud. Well, it's one of the reasons why we're having this. This is one of our first topics, because policy management and transition and rationalization are all transformative blockers to the bigger transformation boulder of moving from hybrid AD join to Azure AD only. And trust me, I've lived this too. Just to kind of be a little bit transparent here, one of the greatest moments in my life at Microsoft was when I got to move from an on-prem join computer with 400 policies coming down at login to the Azure AD join device, and my reboot and login times drastically improved. Now, if that's TMI, Heather, we could edit that in post, but just figured I would go there. But that's a great question, and it's one of the main reasons why we would recommend moving to the cloud as much as possible, because then you can start optimizing what type of traffic you actually have to send over the VPN. For a lot of our customers, their VPN tunneling is basically just selective VPN, selective split tunneling, but sometimes it's forced tunneling, and it's going to be a lot easier on those VPN concentrators if a lot of that traffic can be directed to the cloud rather than actually to the corporate network. So yeah, great questions.
Yeah. So I'm gonna sneakily bring up something that I'm gonna strike a match, not burn anything down, but I just wanted it to sit and resonate with the group. So I'm going to pull up the analytics because I am a huge component of being driven by numbers. We will have a session called Being Driven by Numbers, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Again, I'm just a strike a match, plant a seed, let the seed grow. This is the number one thing I will look at. So out of everything we're talking about today, right, 100% you should turn on our analytics at a minimum, right? So like an action item I say that you should do, go turn on analytics. Why? Because this is where you're going to start getting some insight. And I know I'm probably pointing the wrong direction. We'll figure that out one episode. But ideally, group policy. Look, it actually impacts your system performance, and specifically in this case, startup time. So I've worked with customers before when it comes to analytics that their startup times are insanely long. And guess what? Now we're working from home. You're connected, maybe not connected VPN. You've got several group policies running what? Log on scripts, log off scripts. Now, guess what that impacts? End user experience. Guess what that impacts? Starter performance. Now the device is crashing, having issues. Guess what? Now, beep, help desk ticket. So, again, planting the seed for another show that we're going to do later. Analytics definitely be driven by the numbers, but this is where you start getting some insight. Obviously, in the lab environment here, well, I've been in group policy. Yes, we have a domain controller, but none of the policies are really being delivered from there. They're all being driven from the cloud, so my group policy impact is very low. Right? Anything to add, Steve?
Well, there's a great question here on how we manage policies with remote devices using, I assume, just Config Manager. The user was asking what's the best way that you recommend. I would assume that they're talking about specifically through Config Manager.
100%. If they have config, man, they definitely should be using CIs and configuration baselines to deliver those CIs. This is going to be hands down the best way. Again, what I said earlier, like if I was to be an IT director, would I do group policy? I'm just going to say emphatically, no. It would be my very last option, right? If I had config man, I would do cloud attach. And if I could deliver that policy via cloud, I would go cloud first. So cloud first. If I get challenges, pushbacks from that cloud first direction, I would do config man. Then maybe I would think about group policy if that just chose to be a complete blocker. But config man with a CMG, done deal. I can take care of my whole estate from configuration drift, security, outside the four walls. By far, config man with the CMG is the way to go if you just can't do cloud for whatever different reason. And that could be a dialogue. Yes, it's a lot to try to give an hour conversation with a customer over 20, 30 minutes with this audience, but feel free to reach out to us. Our Twitter information was at the beginning and still at the bottom of the screen. You can reach out to us also on Tech Community. We see there's a lot of questions coming in too, so we'll definitely try to get those questions answered too. What else to add, Steve?
Apparently, I look like Walter White from Breaking Bad. Just some of the DMs that have come into me. At least 4 of them have actually pointed that out. So if 4 are doing it, it's not a coincidence. That was not intended. I guess so, right? So another good question is, we have a customer. I'm currently porting GPOs to Intune. And one of the issues I've run into is group policy preferences with file copy. How would I deploy that within Intune? Think templates, signatures, teams, backgrounds, etc. And that's a huge topic because what we're looking at is this is Microsoft trying to segment something that we kind of put together at one point. 10, 15 years ago, we started merging policies and preference control, or what I call configuration or environmental control, all into one big area. And what we're doing in terms of the cloud is we're not doing that entire thing under the guise of policy. Because if you've noticed, when you play with Endpoint Manager, or when you're doing POCs with Endpoint Manager, you have policy control and compliance, but then you have configuration profiles. And the idea is configuration profiles is where we do more of that user environment control, as opposed to policy, which is strictly adhering to security, adhering to compliance. And we get that customers understand that for some device taxonomies, especially specialized workloads, especially shared devices, they do need to set things that a regular user would likely have more control over their own device that they're using, where there's significant user affinity and a one-to-one device ratio. But for shift workers, first-line workers, specialized workloads, meeting rooms, devices, all of those, IoT devices, kiosk, all of those need some additional lockdown controls. And so when customers reach out to us about those type of gaps, Danny and I are very careful to how we feed those insights where we think they should go. For example, we don't want to start adding to policy those environmental controls when they would be better served over in the configuration profile and configuration control, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yes, there are specific gaps that we're looking at that customers have fed back to us. Probably the biggest one is map drives. Nothing to disclose on that, but I'm just saying we're hearing that feedback constantly about, I would call them like the top 7 or 8. But again, let's go back to transformation for economics. Printers. We get a lot of ask about controlling printers through policy and Intune like they did with GPP. Well, we're shifting paradigm in another direction on printing, where we want printing to be handled through universal print and cloud printing rather than using a cloud solution to manage specifically on-premise style printers using the print server technology from years ago. What we're investing more towards is getting the partner and hardware, our valued hardware partners on board with improving and enhancing that universal cloud print ecosystem.
Yeah, spot on. All right, so let's wrap things up. Again, we appreciate everybody spending a little bit of time with us on a Friday. So some parting thoughts I want to leave with. Things to consider first. This is a partnership. And let me define what that really means. I talk to a lot of customers. Steve talks to a lot of customers. The one thing I'll say I wish customers did more, work together more internally. The things I did back in the day and the things I see customers doing today that remind me of things I did, they should change. And what I'm really talking about, unpack that and say, hey, when I told my group policy guys, or let's say my server admin, say, hey, go make some policies, and these policies will be based on security. They made those policies in a bubble. They didn't make those policies with security. They didn't make them with anybody else. They said, hey, what settings should we set? And they just went and did it. I don't think that really works anymore. I just had a conversation with a customer yesterday when we were talking about this exact same topic, and they wanted to do things in a bubble. Don't do things in a bubble. Go work with your identity team, go work with your security team, and make the proper settings, the things that you need. Do it together. Make it very inclusive. You'll actually be better for career growth, personal growth, as well as your organization will be better for that inclusion. Things not to do, and I'll let Steve take the rest. Don't do junk in, junk out. Do not see pretty shiny buttons and just migrate all of your policies without understanding the impact of that, right? Again, I speak back to the analytics, right? We gave you a tool to go use the tool, but don't put on blinders as you use the tool. What does that mean? Don't do the import, then do the export or the migration, and then say, hey, make them all policies and just deploy them policies. That's probably going to be a bad outcome. And you're just doing junk in, junk out. You didn't be more efficient. You basically just encourage more help desk tickets, more work. So we gave you the tool. We want you to use the tool, but don't just use the tool blindly. So again, going back to that partnership again with Microsoft, we're going to give you the tools to help with that rationalization. Just make sure you use it with, again, for me, it's common sense. I have changed and grown a lot from the various different things when I was a system admin to an IT director, right? Those 15 years were probably the most crucial of my development outside of Microsoft to help me be here and be able to provide, that strategic thought vision for customers. Shortcuts, last but not least for me, try not to take any shortcuts. Again, just because you get pressure from the manager or management saying, hey, we got to do this by next week, don't let that encourage the previous thing we talked about with just junk in, junk out. Press the button now and get things done. That's really just not going to be a good outcome, and I just see visions of support tickets. Steve? Story of the year again, you're on mute.
So we have a great question here that I was following up here on. And we're actually seeing lots of questions on grouping and targeting, and that might be the elephant in the room that we didn't necessarily address, Danny. Is another problem is not necessarily the knobs and whistles or the knobs and buttons and levers and everything, but the fact that many people have complicated hierarchies that were tied to the on-premises Active Directory organizational unit structure. Group policies can be linked not only to targeted groups of users or groups of devices, but it's segmented in a hierarchy, but with OUs, and you can control inheritance. You can control you could control how the effective policies end up at the end of the day. So we're taking that under advisement. We do understand that is a struggling point for customers where they're willing to actually do the policy rationalization from a knobs and buttons and actual configuration item level, but then they have to address how they were doing with this hierarchy. And because we don't have that on-premises style of OU structure in Azure AD as of yet, what they're having to do is they're trying to find out, okay, so how do we transform this process into something that will tie in with Intune, whether it's a combination of using groups and scope tags. And even the customers that have said that say, well, I do need to figure out in advance of how I do this, what kind of impact it's going to have, because I don't necessarily want to do the screen test where I just push the policies out and wait for the help desk calls. So, we're taking that under advisement. We're considering features like what ifs, where you can do a what ifs, or what we would call an effective cloud, a cloud equivalent of what we would call RSOP back in the day, resultant set of policies. And so keep that feedback coming.
Yeah. Well, it's time for us to go. I do appreciate everybody coming out again, spending some time with me and Steve, hearing us ramble about the obviously policy management today. Again, I want to remind everybody you do have a voice. We have some other topics top of mind that we would like to make the next episode about. But if you want to vote, go to the tech community where the blog link was about this, put a response, and we will take that into consideration of what we actually want to deliver next. So with that, have a good day, have a good weekend. Everybody stay safe, and talk to y'all later.
I think this was a great first episode. A few kinks.
It was too.
Yeah.
We'll work them out. All right, everybody, have a good day.